Welcome to the lesson, Engine Starting. Welcome to the lesson, Engine Starting. The engines on the Avro RJ are fitted with DC electrical starter motors for ground starting. If an engine is to be started with the aircraft in flight, airflow through the engine will provide sufficient rotation. Fuel ignition is provided by two independent ignition systems on each engine. Engine start is controlled from the engine section on the overhead panel. Fuel is introduced by the thrust levers, and the fuel flow is controlled by FADEC. The engines may also be started with FADEC inoperative. The start power supply is selected by the start power switch. When the start master is selected on, the start power supply is connected to the start bus. Start power on illuminates when the start bus is powered. Start power can be supplied to the start bus from both transformer rectifiers, TRs. An external DC supply, or the aircraft batteries, if two batteries are fitted. AC power starts. The TRs can be supplied from an external AC power source. The APU generator, or during cross start, an engine-driven generator. In these cases, start power is selected to normal. To ensure that the high start current is shared equally by the TRs, only a single AC power supply can be connected to the bus bar system when start master is on. DC power starts. An external DC supply is used if no AC power is available or if a TR is unserviceable. External DC power can only supply the start bus. It cannot be used to power any other bus bars. In this case, start power is selected to external DC. If external DC is required because a TR is unserviceable, external AC power or the APU generator may still be used to power the bus bars. Battery power starts. If the battery start option is fitted, its use is only recommended if no other start power supplies are available. In this case, the batteries are used to start either the outboard engines from which the remaining engines are cross-started. Battery starting is selected with start power at normal. If start master is selected on, the batteries connect to the start bus when the emergency start button is pressed. When only battery power is available before either an external DC or battery power start, full engine instrumentation becomes powered when start master is selected on. Cold starting. A cold start facility is provided which increases the voltage supplied to the starter motor. Its use is not recommended, but it may be used following an unsuccessful normal start attempt. An external AC power supply rated at a minimum of 90 kVA may be used for cold starts. Or an engine generator may be used for cold starts. The APU generator must not be used for cold starts. Starter motor operation. The Start Select switch is rotated to the engine to be started. The starter motor is powered when the engine switch is selected to start or motor. The starter operating annunciator illuminates whenever the starter motor is rotating. Start operates the starter motor and the igniters and rotates the core of the engine indicated by N2. Both the starter motor and the igniters disconnect at 40% N2 as the engine accelerates under its own power. Motor operates the starter motor only and is used to cool the engine when EGT is above 350 degrees Celsius. A motorcycle must be stopped by selecting Start Master Off. The starter motor continues to run until Start Master is selected off. It is essential that only a single AC power supply is connected to the aircraft bus bars before engine start by ensuring that all power supplies not required for the starting are selected to off, reset, or off. Although the bus bar system is designed to prevent the connection of more than one AC power supply during ground engine starts, damage can occur if the chosen start power supply fails and the bus bar system automatically transfers to an alternative power supply. Engine ignition. Fuel ignition is provided by two igniter units fitted to each engine. Each system has a green engine ignition on annunciator which indicates that power is supplied to the ignition system. For ground starts, a single ignition system is selected by the ground ignition switch. This enables detection of a faulty ignition system if the engine fails to start. The alternative system may be selected to allow the engine to be started. Ground ignition is selected to both for engine starts in very cold conditions. The selected igniter is signaled to operate when the engine switch is selected to start, and terminates when the engine reaches 40% N2. For flight starts, both igniters operate on the selected engine when flight start is on. Flight start ignition is terminated manually by selecting Flight Start to Off when the engine stabilizes at idle. The fuel supply to each engine is controlled manually from the flight deck by the thrust levers. Each thrust lever is mechanically linked to the engine's high-pressure fuel valve, which is opened when the thrust lever is moved above the fuel off position. Normal starts. When the thrust lever is moved to idle, fuel delivery to the combustion chamber is automatically controlled by FADEC in accordance with the pre-programmed acceleration schedule. FADEC off starts. For engine starts where FADEC is not operational, automatic fuel scheduling is not available, so the fuel supply must be controlled manually. This is achieved using an intermediate thrust lever position labeled Fuel On. Excess compressor pressure during start could cause an engine to surge. To prevent surge, the engine anti-ice valves open automatically when the compressor generates sufficient air pressure and close at 40% N2. Indication of correct operation is given by engine valve not shut illuminating briefly on the overhead ice protection panel. Experience has shown that the probability of hot starts can be reduced, increasing the range over which surge protection operates. Engine anti-ice is therefore selected on before start to maintain operation of the system until idle. If an engine is being started in flight, both engine anti-ice valves are signaled to open when flight start is selected on. They will open when the compressor generates sufficient air pressure. The valves remain open until flight start is selected off. Once start power is available and an engine selected, the engine switch is selected to start. Power is supplied simultaneously to the starter motor and fuel igniter and indicated on the engine's panel. The engine compressor begins to rotate, indicated by rising N2. When N2 reaches 10%, the thrust lever is advanced to idle, and fuel is supplied to the combustion chamber. Fuel ignition is confirmed by rising EGT and N2. The maximum allowable EGT is 649 degrees Celsius, but 713 degrees Celsius is allowed for a maximum of 15 seconds. When 40% N2 is reached, the igniter and the starter motor are automatically disconnected. The engine continues to accelerate and stabilizes at ground idle. Starter motor cycles. A maximum of 3 successive start motoring cycles are permitted, with a 1-minute break between each cycle. In this case, the cumulative total starter operating time limit is 80 seconds. If additional start attempts are required, a delay of 1 hour must be made to allow the starter motor to cool. Thereafter, a further 2 start attempts may be made. In this case, the cumulative total starter operating time limit is 60 seconds. A cooling period of 4 hours is required before the initial cycle can be repeated. An engine start cycle may be continued providing N2 reaches 20% before the total starter operating time is exceeded. Each engine motoring cycle must not exceed 20 seconds duration. Engine start limitations. Maximum EGT for engine ground and flight start is 649 degrees Celsius. An overshoot up to 713 degrees Celsius is possible but shall not exceed 15 seconds. Ground idle is 49 to 54% N2, with FADEC off ground, idle is 49 to 75% N2. Minimum N2 for in-flight start is 6%. Do not restart engines if N2 has indicated below 1% for more than 7 minutes. Flight idle is 59% N2 minimum or 67% N2 minimum in icing conditions. The minimum oil pressure during ground idle is 25 psi. The minimum oil pressure during flight idle is 35 psi. Maximum oil temperature is 133 degrees Celsius. 160 degrees Celsius can be experienced when undergoing power reduction. Recovery of an acceptable oil inlet temperature should occur after 2 minutes of steady-state operation. Relight envelope. Engine start in flight is possible up to 20,000 feet. Airspeed should be established between 185 and 240 knots indicated airspeed, and N2 should be 6%. Relight may be attempted up to 25,000 feet, but the start may not be successful. After the AC bus bars have been powered, the ground ignition switch is set to either A or B as required by airline policy. The ignition systems are normally alternated on a daily off-sector basis. Both engine ignition A on and engine ignition B on annunciators are checked off. The FADEC fault off annunciator should be extinguished. N2 should be 0 and EGT below 350 degrees Celsius for each engine to be started. The electrics panel is checked to ensure that a single AC supply is selected on. All 4 engine NTI switches must be checked on to extend the operation of the automatic surge protection system. On the engine's panel, the start power switch is checked at normal. The start master switch is selected on. This will connect the start power source to the start bus, which is confirmed by the white start power on annunciator. The start select switch is rotated on the first engine to be started, which is normally engine number 4. The engine switch should be pressed and then released. This selection engages the starter motor and ignition circuits, which can be confirmed by checking that the white starter operating and the green engine ignition A or B on annunciators illuminate. Engine rotation is confirmed by checking the N2 gauge. When N2 reaches 10%, the thrust lever trigger is depressed and the thrust lever advanced to the idle position. Within a few seconds, fuel ignition occurs, which is indicated by increasing EGT. Once this increase is observed, a check should be made to ensure that the fan is rotating by checking the N1 gauge. Oil pressure is checked to ensure that it is rising. It is now essential that the N2 and EGT gauges are monitored carefully for any abnormalities until the engine stabilizes at idle. At 40% N2, ignition stops and the engine ignition A or B on annunciators extinguish. The starter motor is also disconnected at 40% N2. However, the starter operating light may remain illuminated for a few seconds. The starter operating annunciator must be out within 10 seconds of reaching ground idle. Once the engine stabilizes at idle, all engine parameters are checked for any abnormalities. These include fuel flow, N2, EGT, N1, oil pressure, and the oil low pressure annunciator. Once a successful start has been achieved, the start select switch should be rotated to the next engine and the sequence repeated. Starter operating and engine ignition annunciators must be out before selecting the next engine. Following start of all 4 engines, the start power switch is checked at normal, and the start select and start master switches should be selected off. Start power on must be checked off to confirm that the start bus is no longer powered. The engine NTI system can now be selected as required. If an engine generator is to be used as the AC power source, N2 must be increased to 60%. This ensures that the generator load does not pull engine speed below idle. In high ambient temperatures or at high altitudes, 65% N2 is recommended. If a FADEC is unserviceable before start, it must be selected off before a start is attempted. There is no automatic fuel scheduling or limiting with FADEC off, so it is important that all engine limitations are monitored carefully. The engine start is carried out as normal, but at 10% N2, the thrust lever should be moved to the intermediate fuel on position. When N2 and EGT stabilize, the thrust lever should be advanced to idle whilst monitoring EGT carefully. The engine should accelerate to idle between 49 and 75% N2. If AC power on both TRs are not available for starting, DC power may be used. The FADEC must be serviceable and selected on. This procedure is prohibited if the FADEC is off. The batteries are selected on and their voltage checked. External DC power is connected to the aircraft and the voltage checked between 26 and 29 volts. Start power is selected to external DC and Start Master is selected on. Start power on should be lit. When Start Master is selected on, the emergency and essential DC bus bars are connected and all engine instruments are now available. In addition, the panel and console floodlights are powered. The FADEC for the engine to be started is checked on. The Start Select switch is rotated to either engine number 4 or 1. The engine switch is selected to start and the ignition and starter annunciators checked. FADEC fault may illuminate briefly, indicating that automatic EGT over temperature protection is not available. If it does illuminate after selecting start, fuel must not be selected until it has been extinguished for 5 seconds and N2 is above 10%. When N2 reaches 10%, the thrust lever trigger is depressed and the thrust lever advanced to the fuel on position. The engine will accelerate to idle with the thrust lever in the fuel on position because the FADEC is scheduling fuel. When the engine stabilizes at idle, the thrust lever is advanced to the idle position. The bus bars can now be powered from the engine generator, allowing the remaining flight deck safety checks to be carried out. The other engines can be cross-started with AC power now. In-flight engine starts can be carried out with or without FADEC. The relight envelope for in-flight starting is up to 20,000 feet at speeds between 185 and 240 knots. A start may be attempted up to 25,000 feet, but may not be successful. Before starting the engine, rotation of N1 and N2 must be confirmed. A minimum of 6% N2 must be indicated. N2 may be increased if necessary by increasing airspeed. However, a start must not be attempted if N2 has indicated 1% or less for more than 7 minutes because of the danger of engine core seizure due to lack of oil pressure. The relevant thrust lever must be in the fuel off position, and either the generator or hydraulic pump must be checked off. The N2 of a shutdown engine is significantly higher when these services are selected off. The engine to be started is selecting using the Start Select switch, and the FADEC mode selector is checked auto. Flight start is selected on, and both igniters in the selected engine operate. The thrust lever is moved to idle and the engine should accelerate to flight idle. If FADEC is inoperative, it must be selected off before start. Flight start is selected on and the thrust lever is moved to the fuel on position. When N2 and EGT stabilize, the thrust lever should be advanced to idle. When the engine is stabilized at idle, flight start is selected off. If the start was unsuccessful, a second start at a lower altitude should be attempted. Hot or hung start. During any engine start, N2 and EGT must be carefully monitored until the engine stabilizes at idle. A hot start is characterized by EGT rising quickly once fuel ignition is achieved. A hung start is characterized by N2 increasing at a slower rate than normal. If the start is to be aborted before starter cutout, the thrust lever must be moved to fuel off immediately. Leaving Start Master selected on allows the starter motor to cool the engine. Start Master is selected off when EGT is below 350 degrees Celsius. If the start is aborted after starter cutout, the thrust lever must be moved to fuel off and the Start Master selected off. If EGT remains above 350 degrees Celsius, a motoring cycle is carried out when N2 reaches zero. Start power remains on after start. If start power on remains lit after Start Master has been selected off, all thrust levers must be selected to fuel off and no further engine starts are permitted. Starter operating must be extinguished within 10 seconds of the engine reaching idle. If not, the Start Master switch must be selected off, and all thrust levers must be selected to fuel off. No further engine starts are permitted. Congratulations, you have now completed this module.